Some teenagers in Christiansburg, Virginia attended a party. Before they left, two of them tried to clear frozen snow and ice out of the bed of a pickup truck. They couldn't get all of it out because of the slope of the vehicle, so they drove to a flat spot on the street and pushed out the remaining frozen snow and ice. The music they were playing in the truck was audible as they did it. Then they drove away. That's what happened. That is the complete, factual account of the incident, documented by the Christiansburg Police Department after a detailed investigation that included multiple interviews and a third-party eyewitness. Here is what was alleged to have happened. A black Virginia Tech sociology professor named, I'm going to mess this one up, Onwubuike Agozino, filed a criminal hate crime complaint with police, claiming he had been targeted at his home by a group of white men who hurled ice bricks onto his property, blocked his driveway, and unleashed a torrent of racial slurs. The New River Valley chapter of the national activist organization Indivisible published a Facebook post asserting as established fact that a hate crime had been committed, calling the teen's behavior a despicable act of racist intimidation and harassment, and demanding criminal prosecution at the state level and under federal hate crime laws. The story spread. National attention followed. The teenagers, juveniles, minors were publicly accused of committing a racially motivated hate crime against a professor. The police investigated. They found no evidence of criminal intent. They found no evidence of racial bias. They found teenagers clearing snow out of a truck bed. They cleared the juveniles of the allegations entirely. The accusation went national. The exoneration did not.
The independent media company The Truth in the Darkness Network presents the Courage in the Darkness show with your host, Philip Roberts, shutting down the narrative and bringing you the truth that the indoctrinated leftist sheep can't handle.
The facts of this case need to be placed side by side, what was alleged and what the investigation found, because the distance between those two things is the entire story. Dr. Onwubuike Agozino, I'm sorry, I really am, is a professor of sociology at Virginia Tech. He describes himself, in his own words, as a scholar activist who values inclusive excellence and diversity with critical attention focused on people of African descent and other marginalized groups, who emphasizes race, class, and gender issues in his contributions beyond the boundaries of the classroom. He had recently run for a political office as a delegate candidate in Virginia's 42nd District. On February 10th, he filed a criminal complaint with the Christiansburg Police Department alleging that a group of white men had targeted his home in a racially motivated attack. New River Valley Indivisible, the local chapter of the National Indivisible organization, the same organization the show is documented as a significant node in the protest industrial complex, which reported $12.6 million in revenue in the fiscal year of 2023 and has received substantial funding from progressive donor networks, published a detailed Facebook post treating the alleged hate crime as an established fact. The post named Agozino by name identified him as a political figure who had run for delegate, described the alleged perpetrators as 8 white young men in 4 trucks, asserted that they had unleashed a torrent of racial slurs, including a specific epithet, and claimed they threw ice bricks onto the property and blocked his driveway in a calculated effort to terrorize and intimidate. The post called for criminal prosecution at the state level and under federal hate crime statutes. It went out to the organization's followers and was amplified through the networks of national progressive media and activist organizations that treat unverified hate crime allegations as confirmed events. The Christiansburg Police Department investigated. Detectives conducted several interviews, including a third-party eyewitness who was present and observed what actually happened. Their findings: a group of juveniles had been attending an organized function at a nearby home. Before leaving, 2 of them tried to clear frozen snow and ice from the bed of a truck. They couldn't finish the job because of the vehicle's slope. They drove to a flat spot on the street and pushed the rest out. The snow and ice went into the street. The music playing in the truck was audible. Then they left. The department's statement was unambiguous. There is no evidence of criminal intent or racial bias. The gap between the allegation and the finding is not a matter of interpretation or ambiguity. A national activist organization published a detailed accusation of racially motivated hate crime. The police found teenagers clearing snow from a truck. Those are not 2 competing perspectives on the same event. One of them is what happened. The other is what was claimed without adequate basis. Published as fact and amplified through networks that reached hundreds of thousands of people. The teenagers whose names may have circulated through those networks, who are minors, whose identities are protected in press coverage, but whose community knows who was at that party, live with the residue of that accusation in a way that the department's exoneration statement does not fully erase. The New River Valley Indivisible Post is not a minor footnote in this story. It's the mechanism by which a criminal complaint filed by one individual became a national narrative about racist terrorism in a Virginia college town. And understanding how that mechanism operates is essential to understanding the full scope of harm done. Indivisible is not a local grassroots organization. It's a national nonprofit with documented revenue of $12.6 million in the fiscal year of 2023. Significant funding from progressive donor networks, including organizations affiliated with George Soros, Open Society foundations, and a national infrastructure of local chapters operating in communities across the country. It's stated its mission is progressive advocacy and resistance to conservative political agendas. Its chapters are trained, coordinated, and connected to a national communications apparatus that can amplify local stories into national coverage within hours when those stories fit the narrative framework the organization promotes. Sounds a lot like MSNBC and Clinton News Network, doesn't it? The New River Valley chapter published its post with no indication that it had independently verified any of the specific claims it was asserting as fact. It did not say that a professor had filed a complaint alleging these things. It said these things happened. It described the alleged racial slurs as a statement of fact. It described the ice as bricks thrown onto the property. It described the conduct as calculated intimidation. These are specific, inflammatory, factual claims published under the banner of a nationally connected organization with media relationships, legal advocacy networks, and political credibility with the progressive institutions that consume and amplify its content. The Post demanded criminal prosecution before any investigation had concluded. It treated the accusation as the verdict. This is how modern hate crime narrative machine operates. A complaint is filed, an activist organization with national reach publishes it as an established fact. The national media, conditioned by years of covering stories that fit the racism is everywhere framework, amplifies it without adequate verification. The accused, in this case, minors who cannot defend themselves publicly because of their age, are convicted in the court of progressive opinion before a single detective has conducted a single interview. And when the investigation finds no evidence of what was alleged, the correction receives a fraction of the attention the original allegation did. The College Fix reported the exoneration. Fox News Digital covered it. The organizations and news outlets that amplified the original allegation have not returned requests for comments. New River Valley Indivisible did not return the Truth in the Darkness Network's request for comment. That silence is not neutral. An organization that published detailed factual assertions about a racially motivated hate crime, demanded criminal prosecution of the alleged perpetrators, and used the incident to advance its political narrative about racism in American communities, has an obligation to correct the record when a police investigation finds no evidence supporting those assertions. Its silence in the face of that obligation is a statement about what the organization regards as its accountability standard. The answer is none. Publish the allegation, amplify the narrative, go silent when the facts don't cooperate. That is the operational model, and it has consequences for real people. In this case, for teenagers who cannot publicly defend themselves and whose community has been told by a nationally connected organization presenting itself as a civil rights advocate that they committed a hate crime. Dr. Agostino's response to the police exoneration deserves careful examination because it reveals the logical framework that the hate crime allegation industry uses to insulate itself from factual correction. When the police told him there was no evidence of hate crime, Agostino did not acknowledge that the investigation had found his complaint to be without evidentiary support. He argued that intent may be irrelevant. His argument was that reckless or unreasonable behavior that is threatening to anyone is considered a breach of the law, even if there is no intent to harm anyone. He continued to refer to the juveniles as suspects after the police had cleared them. He expressed concern that the police finding of no evidence would unwittingly embolden the suspects. He described a truck that he said parked near his mailbox for 20 minutes the following day. The same truck, he believed, from the group that had attended the party as a continuing threat. The argument that intent is irrelevant to a hate crime analysis is legally incorrect as applied to the federal hate crime statutes that Indivisible demanded to be used to prosecute these teenagers. Federal hate crime enhancements require proof of specific intent, that the underlying criminal act was motivated by bias against a protected characteristic. Without that specific intent, there is no federal hate crime. The Christiansburg police found no evidence of the underlying criminal act having occurred at all, and no evidence of racial bias motivating any conduct. The intent question doesn't arise because there is no evidence that a crime occurred in the first place. But the legal analysis is almost beside the point, because Agazzino's framework is not primarily a legal argument. It's an epistemological one. It's the claim that when a person of his background in a community with America's racial history experiences something that feels threatening, the subjective experience of threat is itself evidence of a racially motivated attack, regardless of what any investigation finds. Under that framework, an exoneration is not a finding of innocence. It's a finding that will unwittingly embolden the suspects. The investigation's conclusion that no crime occurred does not resolve the matter. It creates a new problem, which is that the absence of criminal finding might make the alleged perpetrators more confident in their alleged racism. That framework is not arguable with. It's not designed to be. Any evidence of racist intent confirms the theory. Any absence of evidence of racist intent is reinterpreted as institutional failure to recognize racism, or as a chilling effect that will produce more racism, or as proof that the investigation itself was inadequate. The professor who filed the complaint has built a worldview in which white teenagers clearing snow from a truck near his house cannot be understood as white teenagers clearing snow from a truck near his house. It must be understood as a potential racial attack because he is who he is. They are who they are. And America is what he believes it to be. That worldview was credentialed, amplified, and deployed by a nationally connected activist organization against minors who were at a party and had the misfortune of needing to clear their truck bed on the same street where this professor lives. The Christiansburg's case is not an anomaly. It's one entry in a long and documented record of high-profile hate crime allegations that did not survive contact with investigation, whose initial amplification caused significant and sometimes irreversible harm to the accused, and whose corrections were treated as significantly less newsworthy than the original allegations. A Texas jury recently awarded a teenager $3.2 million after he was falsely accused of race-based bullying in a case that went viral. The accusations against him were treated as fact by the media and the activist organizations that amplified them. The subsequent investigation and verdict that cleared him did not receive proportional coverage. He spent years with the accusations following him before the jury formally established the falsity of the claims. $3.2 million is what a jury determined that false accusation was worth in compensable damage. The amount tells you something about the actual cost of being publicly accused of racist conduct in America. A cost that the organizations that public accusations as facts and go silent when investigations find otherwise are imposing on real people without accountability. The Jussie Smollett case, a nationally covered alleged hate crime that turned out to be staged by the alleged victim, produced weeks of saturation media coverage in its allegation phase and a fraction of that coverage in its accountability phase. The Duke lacrosse case produced career-ending accusations against multiple students based on allegations that did not survive investigation. The Covington Catholic High School students accused of racist intimidation in a viral video that, when reviewed in full context, showed something entirely different from what the initial coverage claimed. In every one of these cases, the allegation phase was characterized by the same elements: an accusation framed as obvious fact, amplification by activist organizations and sympathetic media, demands for prosecution and professional destruction of the accused, and near total silence or minimal correction when the facts refused to cooperate. The teenagers in Christiansburg are juveniles. Their names are not published, but they live in a community where the party they attended has been identified, where the trucks have been described, where Indivisible published a post calling their conduct a despicable act of racist intimidation and demanding federal prosecution. They go to school in that community. They have parents, siblings, coaches, teachers, neighbors. The accusation reached all of those people before the investigation reached any of them. The investigation's conclusion: no evidence of criminal intent, no evidence of racial bias, has reached fewer of them because corrections travel less far and less fast than accusations, especially when the organizations that amplified the accusation declined to amplify the correction. The Rutgers poll that we've discussed on the show has found that more than half of left-of-center Americans said murdering Donald Trump was at least somewhat justified. The academic establishment shrugged at Charlie Kirk's assassination. The Hermantown curriculum told 8th graders that ICE agents are kidnappers. And the New River Valley Indivisible told its followers that teenagers clearing snow out of a truck were white supremacist terrorists who should be federally prosecuted. These are not separate pathologies. They are the same pathology operating at different scales, in different institutional contexts, producing the same fundamental output: the dehumanization of people on the wrong side of the ideological divide, with no accountability for the harm the dehumanization causes when it turns out to be false. Teenagers cleared snow from a truck in Christiansburg, Virginia. A professor filed a hate crime complaint. A nationally connected activist organization published the complaint as established fact, named the alleged perpetrators, demanded federal prosecution, and called their conduct a calculated effort to terrorize. The police investigated, interviewed witnesses, found no evidence of criminal intent or racial bias and cleared the juveniles. The organization that published the allegation has not returned requests for comment and has not corrected the record. Those teenagers are still in their community. The accusation is still out there. The indivisible post did not disappear when the police issued their finding. It remains accessible to anyone who searches for news about the incident, and it says things about those young people that the investigation found to be without evidentiary support. They're minors. They can't sue for defamation as public figures. They can't hold the press conference. They can't run an organization that publishes a correction with the same reach as the original allegation. They are juveniles in a Virginia town who cleared their truck and drove away. And they're going to carry the residue of a nationally amplified hate crime accusation because the organizations that made the accusation do not believe they owe anyone an accounting when they're wrong. I believe they do. I'm saying so. I'm going to keep saying so every time the accusation as punishment machine runs over people who did nothing wrong. Because the silence that follows the correction is exactly as consequential as the noise that followed the allegation. And somebody needs to fill it. Stand with us, support the mission, refuse the silence. Find us at TITDUSA.com and the Stand Against the Silence campaign. I'll see you next time. God bless.